Herzlich willkommen zurück und jetzt geht es auf Englisch weiter. Die Session heißt Embracing Uncertainties, How to Benefit from Impact-Driven Storytelling and Distribution in Times Like These. Und dafür habe ich jetzt Sarah und Rebecca zugeschaltet. Sarah and Rebecca, can you hear and see me?
Yeah, we can.
Hi there.
Hi, hello from London.
Hey, how you doing? How's it going? Are you all right?
Good, thank you. Very well, very well.
Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you for inviting us today.
Sarah, you're the founder and CEO of Together Films. We have a, I would guess, largely German audience here. Can you perhaps describe what a distribution, marketing and data agency is?
Yeah, sure. So Together Films, we were founded to amplify the reach and revenue of impact-based stories. So these are films and content that aim to change perceptions on things like human rights, the environment, women's rights. So depending on the project we're working on, we work across marketing, distribution and data to essentially make sure that the film is reaching the right audience in the right time to create the right kind of impact. So for some of our projects, that might be VR. For some of them, it's theatrical releasing. For some of them, it's kind of community-based screenings. So we really take a customized approach per project, but really everything is done in a data-driven way to create the biggest impact possible.
Rebecca, you're the campaign director at Together Films, and one of the things you do is impact distribution campaigns, and perhaps you can sort of explain the difference to, let's say, just old school, normal distribution campaigns. What's the difference there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I focus on managing our film campaigns, and that's very much about making sure that a film reaches our target audience on the right platform, but also achieves the impact goals that the filmmakers had in mind when they made that film. So it's kind of about combining traditional film distribution and working with all the different distribution models that are available, but also thinking very creatively outside of the box about how you can reach an audience and how you can use a film to engage people, to get them inspired and excited to be involved in a campaign. So with every campaign we work on, we have a very specific impact objective and specific calls to action that we're encouraging audiences to get involved with. So it might be to sign a petition, to fundraise. It really depends on the campaign, but like Sarah said, we're very specific about creating bespoke campaigns for every film we work on. So it's not kind of a one-size-fits-all model.
Interesting. So let's say a filmmaker comes to your company and he or she says, I have this documentary about an environmental issue, and I want to reach a lot of people, and I want people to sign a petition, and then you take that on and create a campaign around that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really balancing, I'd say, kind of the traditional distribution of like the commercial intent. So part of it is always kind of what is the commercial benefit of that project? Like if they want to be earning money in cinemas, if they want to be selling DVDs, it's kind of underpinning that with then what is a call to action for a petition or for a donation page and balancing the two together. So the key thing being that the impact for us is sort of like an amazing addition to a distribution campaign rather than like a distraction or it's a lot of work, but it's kind of like it's a benefit to the whole of the project as it runs through.
Yeah, and I'd also add to that means that we sometimes work outside of traditional distribution models. So if we feel that the target audience who are going to help us to achieve those campaign goals are people that might not traditionally go to the cinema, that means that we'll take the film to them, to perhaps community groups, to churches, to places of worship where individuals can host their own screenings of our films, kind of engage their local communities to get them involved and excited. So we've done a lot of very creative campaigns in care homes. We've had projections on dams. We've actually done a lot of screenings in Germany with our campaigns, specifically on environmental issues. So yeah, we're really excited that there's quite a big audience and activist movement for some of the titles we work on within Germany.
Before we go further into that, you guys, since you guys are in the UK, perhaps give me a little bit of an update. What's the situation there like with the coronavirus, and how has that impacted your guys' work in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, so as most of Europe, a lot of our cinema spaces are on lockdown. A lot of our public spaces are on lockdown. So any activity that we had planned for in-cinema experience essentially got paused or cancelled. We were actually working on the Human Rights Watch Film Festival, which is one of our projects we work on. They have a London edition of their festival and a New York edition of their festival. And we just done the opening night in London for Human Rights Watch. And then the next day essentially had to postpone the festival due to health and safety because of COVID. So a really awful experience to have to tell the filmmakers that the festival had to be postponed. And that was literally the first day of lockdown here in the UK. We've actually now been working with the team based in New York to migrate the New York edition of the festival in June to a digital experience. So that was announced in the press last week, and we'll be putting tickets on sale for that next week. And so in June, there will be now a week-long version of a digital edition of the Human Rights Watch Film Festival. But yeah, it was so sad in the first day of the lockdown to basically have to postpone a festival the day after we launched it here in London, that first edition.
And in terms of your company, is that a dangerous situation that you guys are in now in terms of campaigns that got cancelled and so on?
Yeah, so we're kind of, we pivoted very quickly to sort of thinking how can we activate digitally some of the things that we were working on. So, for example, as well, we were just about to announce a US theatrical release for a title we work on called 2040, which is a climate change film that looks at the solutions to the climate crisis. So we were sort of gearing up for this amazing sort of announcement for a regular theatrical. Our campaigns, we work across Europe and also North America. And so just yesterday, we announced in Deadline that we'll be doing a virtual theatrical release of that on the 5th of June, and calling in a positive way, rather than just having cinemas take part in that opening launch, we're allowing any organisation, whether you're a cinema or a kind of campaign group or a non-theatrical venue, to take part in what is now known as a virtual theatrical release from Friday the 5th of June, which is World Environment Day.
And if there's a positive aspect in all of that, is it perhaps that we see a spark of creativity in terms of the campaigns you run, in terms of the projects filmmakers are doing? Is that something that is happening in the UK as well? We witnessed that in Germany, at least.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd also say from an audience perspective, I think audiences are taking more risks about the kind of content that they engage with. So we saw a survey yesterday by the, I think it was the UK Cinema Association, and they've been analysing audience data as to what people are watching at this time. And about 35% of audience members said they've tried a new cultural experience because of COVID. So that's meant that people who haven't traditionally watched theatre or been to the theatre, they're now live streaming theatre and opera and ballet, and then perhaps also watching films that they might not usually watch. So that's quite exciting data to use, and hopefully we can use in the future with future campaigns.
And I think just in general as well, with the switch to sort of digital transformation, there was a report I was reading the other day where it basically said we've had about 2 years worth of like technical knowledge development in like 2 months. So this is both from like a platform scenario, what are the platforms people are building, how are we getting these projects online, what's the process for sort of live streaming Q&A events and streaming films, but also from an audience development point of view. So those audiences, as we would refer to them in the UK, as the silver pound, those kind of over 65s who traditionally would go to physical screenings, we're seeing now sort of an audience development process where we're encouraging some audience demographics who will have never consumed film or paid for film content via any of these online platforms, going through this process of sort of discovery of how to utilize these platforms because they really want to watch this content. So it's about 2 years worth of sort of audience development has been fast-tracked into 2 months because people just have to learn now how to kind of get online.
Yeah. And I'd also say that I think it means that in this moment, we're all at home. So that's like all our high profile actors are at home, our filmmakers are at home, and people are hungry and want to be keeping busy and doing things. So it's meant over the last few weeks that we've had access to people that we perhaps wouldn't usually be able to get involved in one of our campaigns because of their time commitments and obviously travel commitments and costs of travel. So yeah, it's been fantastic. We've done some really amazing Q&As over the last few weeks with people from their beds hosting Q&As or in their kitchens, which I think again for audiences means that audiences get kind of a new perspective on things, and it's quite exciting to get to see an Academy Award-winning actress in her kitchen, just being at home like the rest of us. So, yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, I think it's been fun as well, and very interesting to see, you know, what kind of what people come up with in terms of innovative ways in promoting their new projects and so on. But at the same time, in Germany, we see an industry that is really suffering. I mean, the cinemas are suffering. A lot of actors are suffering because they don't have any jobs. Production companies are going bankrupt. Is that similar in the UK? And perhaps can you describe whether what politics are doing? Is the government supporting the film industry? And is there any sort of light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely hit the industry in a very difficult way. A lot of the sector relies on the sort of live experience and consumers going out to watch these projects in cinema. So in the first few weeks, there were a few cinemas that went bankrupt within like 2 or 3 weeks since the lockdown, that the amount of cash flow they had available in reserves was so low that they couldn't survive after sort of 2 or 3 weeks. The government in the UK introduced a program of support called the furlough scheme, which basically suggested that if an organisation was on the verge of having to let go a staff member because of lack of commercial activity. So a cinema would be a good example of this. There are no patrons coming into your cinema. They're not allowed to come into your cinema. You would have had to let go staff at that point. The UK government is providing an 80% relief on staff wages. So it essentially says that if you were going to let this person go, or there were not enough hours of work to sustain that employee, the government will pay for 80% of their salary for them to sort of like basically stay at home kind of in that regard. So they've announced that for the first 3 months of support. So organisations can apply to that scheme. It led to millions and millions and millions of pounds being given by the UK government. What people will be able to do after those 3 months, we still don't know. I think the difficulty was with the self-employed people in our sector. So as you say, actors, directors, many people who are not on staff salaries, the ability to access finance for them has been a bit more difficult. The way that you access the funding, how you apply for it, is a much more complex process. And so I think those in our sector who are self-employed and not a staff member of an organisation have suffered quite a lot more. And it's quite uncertain, sort of the viability of I think it's highlighted to us the real fragility of the fact that the majority of our sector is self-employed, independent sort of contractors. And so if you lose one contract, another contract that was lined up for the next 6 months, you could potentially be looking at a zero income level for the rest of the year, which is a big issue for us in the UK.
So is enough being done? Is there enough support from the government, or do you wish for more?
I think the government are definitely trying to do some good stuff. The furlough scheme, I think, being introduced has helped a number of organisations that we know of. I think the self-assessment thing has been a big talking point in our sector. A number of sort of the Facebook groups that we're involved in, the lack of support for sort of self-employed people has been difficult. There has been things that have been launched outside of sort of government as well. So there's a film and TV charity which has received some funding from big institutions like Netflix, and others have contributed funds into that pot. And that is providing some relief to self-assessment, self-employed contractors through there. So there are sort of other schemes that are sort of launching. So I think they're getting better. But I think when the initial relief package was announced, I'd say 50% of our sector were not so happy with it because of the way it treated self-employed people.
Yeah. And just to add to that, so that fund that Sarah mentions is in partnership with the British Film Institute, who is our main funding body for the film industry in the UK. So we know that they're also working really hard with exhibition in the UK to put together a strategy as to how we can reopen cinemas in a safe way, and how organisations can respond to that at the right time in the best, most effective way. We also know that the BFI are working really closely with producers, production companies and independent producers to put together some safeguarding practices that I think should be announced in the next couple of weeks as to how production can move ahead in a safe way. So we know that people are behind the scenes working incredibly hard to make sure that once the lockdown is removed, that we can all move ahead to start working again, start making amazing work again and sharing it with the world. But yeah, following like health and safety guidelines.
I think there's been an interesting development that streaming platforms obviously are the winners in these situations. While cinemas are closing, a lot of movies are being released straight on the streaming platforms. Film festivals are accepting films that have previously not been in the cinemas but been released on streaming platforms. What's your opinion on cinemas and streaming platforms, friends or foes?
Yes, it's very interesting. We actually launched a webinar series in the first week of the lockdown when we advise about 200 films a year around their kind of impact goals and run sort of lab and mentoring sessions. We had a number of the people we work with being like, basically freaking out, like, how do I go online? What does that mean to go online? What does that mean for my rights, my distribution, my strategy? So we launched a webinar in the first week just to be like, okay, guys, number one, what are the different platforms that you could use? So if you needed to create your own campaign, how does Vimeo OTT work? How does Shift 72 work? What are all these different technology platforms? And over the last 7 weeks, we've been running it every Monday for the last few weeks. We've been interviewing the different distributors and cinemas on their digital perspective of how this is impacting their sort of work. So we're now kind of into week 8 of that. We're starting to see some of the real box office numbers from some of those virtual theatrical experiments to see if it's working and it isn't. And I think some of the kind of the main feedback that we've been seeing is the launch of these virtual cinemas has provided a revenue stream for exhibition that had just been wiped out. So in the US market, where it's been used a lot more, they're doing a 50-50 split, mostly between distributor and exhibitor, with a ticket price of $12. So slightly lower than a regular ticket fee for the kind of New York, LA market, but a fair sort of across the country. If we do a virtual cinema and you co-host with that cinema, you will be able to take a 50% revenue share of that income, which is a really amazing thing for the industry to kind of have that. I think a bigger question around what does that mean for the future for sort of windowing, kind of our sector works in a very stringent kind of, you will be in cinemas only for 3 months, 90 days, depending on the territory. And then you do everything else afterwards. Now we're seeing sort of an intervention where we had to go online. And so cinemas co-adopting this kind of virtual theatrical model is a really interesting thing. And then we see examples, which I'm sure everybody has read, of things like the Universal release of Patrols and the sort of conversation between AMC about whether or not Universal will be able to release sort of day and date in the future. So we do not speak on behalf of either of those organizations, but it's a really interesting conversation to be having, because the idea of windows in general and why do we have these holdbacks and who does that support and in what way is being questioned in a number of different routes. So I think the way that the industry has responded has been very positive. The fact that distribution immediately said, okay, we want to partner with cinemas, because they could have just done it themselves. They could have just said, hey, buy a ticket online, great, watch our films. But the ability to say, look, we want to share this revenue with cinema, kind of engage your audiences, keep them engaged with our titles, has been a really positive start. So I think we're now in sort of week 8 of our webinar and sort of week 8 of this moment. We're starting to see sort of trends. We're starting to see what's a good performing title, what's a bad performing title, what are the marketing tactics that are working. But I think it will be a really fascinating thing to watch over the sort of next 6 to 12 months as how some of these new strategies for engagement are sort of expanded across the sector when we're no longer on lockdown. Sort of how do we retain some of these ideas?
These webinars you're doing on a weekly basis, are they for UK filmmakers specifically, or can anyone across the world join?
Yeah, anyone can join. We originally our network is quite European focused in North America. We work across the US and Europe. But for example, last week we had people tuning in from Brazil, Mumbai. So it's become a sort of international conversation, because I think we're all having the same questions. So yeah, anyone can join in. And I'd say we sort of try and balance a European case study with a North American case study to show sort of what's working there. And within that, kind of as part of our exploration around this work, we launched a campaign called Stay Home, Watch Together, that went out, I every day feels like a month at the moment. Went out about 3 weeks ago, which was a kind of combined viewing experience for impact films. And we were working in partnership with, it was ourselves, with a producer in Brazil, a team in North America, to highlight films that had impact campaigns that had been affected by COVID. And we had 47 countries worldwide taking part in that initiative and tuning into those titles. So I feel in this new digital moment, sort of every activation we're trying to do is on a kind of global footprint, and trying to kind of raise awareness and raise engagement in multiple countries.
Rebecca and Sarah, thank you so much. That was a very interesting perspective from the UK. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you for having us, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Das war die Perspektive aus dem United Kingdom, wie es in der Filmindustrie gerade da aussieht. Und jetzt wollen wir uns nochmal die deutsche Perspektive reinholen. Und deswegen spreche ich mit Christian Breuer. Er ist Geschäftsführer der York Kinogruppe und Vorstandsvorsitzender der AG Kino. Hallo Christian, hörst du mich? Grüß dich.
Ja, hallo Luis, schön bei dir zu sein.
Na, in welchem Kino bist du denn gerade?
Also ich bin zu Hause, aber das hinter mir ist das Delphi Lux.
Ah, okay.
Unser neuestes Kino am Zoo. Und ist etwas mehr Atmosphäre.
Sag mal, Christian, wir haben uns vor ein paar Wochen für meinen Podcast gesprochen und da sind wir zusammen durchs leere Kino gelaufen und du hast gesagt, du hast die Hoffnung, dass es bald wieder weitergeht mit Hygienekonzepten, vielleicht weniger Leute ins Kino lassen. Wie ist deine Stimmung im Moment? Wie groß ist die Hoffnung?
Ja, ich glaube, insgesamt seit gestern gibt es ja wieder die Hoffnung, dass Kino in Deutschland bald wieder offen sind. Einzelne Länder haben das sogar schon jetzt für die nächste und übernächste Woche angekündigt. Das geht jetzt für den Moment erstmal fast holter die Polter, weil es gibt jetzt erstmal Eröffnungstermine, ohne dass klar ist, zu welchen Auflagen das genau funktioniert. Da wollen wir jetzt Klarheit schaffen. Insgesamt ist es aber ein gutes Signal zu wissen, dass Kinos bald wieder dabei sind. Und wir mit unseren kulturellen Angeboten auch in der Nachbarschaft da sind.
Du musst noch mal vielleicht für Leute, die nicht wissen, auf was für Kosten Kinos eigentlich sitzen, erklären, warum ist das so schlimm, wenn Kinos jetzt für Wochen zubleiben und keine Zuschauer haben? Was sind da die großen Fixkosten?
Na, das ist eigentlich ganz einfach. Man sieht, das sind große Gebäude und große Gebäude verursachen große Kosten. Das fängt ganz zu vorne mit der Miete an, aber auch der Raumunterhalt, Versicherung etc. Da läuft sehr viel weiter. Auch im Personalbereich, jeder weiß es, im Kino arbeiten viele Studenten, auch Minijobber, die fallen alle nicht unter die Kurzarbeiterregelung. Für uns ist es klar, dass wir die jetzt nicht einfach hängen lassen können. Es gibt auch vertragliche Verpflichtungen, aber damit bleiben auch eklatant Personalkosten, die weiter zu tragen sind. Das läppert sich durchaus auch beim Unternehmen wie bei uns schon auch deutlich im sechsstelligen Bereich. Und dann weiß man, ohne Erlöse ist das nicht sehr schön und auch nicht einfach ewig so tragbar.
Ich habe eben mit Kollegen aus England gesprochen, die haben gesagt, da gibt es Unterstützung auch für die Kinos vom Staat und das reicht gerade mal so. Wie ist das in Deutschland? Fühlt ihr euch genug unterstützt von der Regierung?
Also insgesamt geht es nicht auf Sicht fahren. Wir müssen sagen, dankenswerterweise hat Medienboard hier in Berlin-Brandenburg sofort die Kinoprogrammpreise erhöht und ausgezahlt. Das Gleiche ist jetzt diese Woche auch durch Kulturstaatsministerin Grütters passiert. Das ist gerade für die Kinos, die ein sehr vielfältiges Programm haben, eine ganz wichtige Unterstützung jetzt in dieser Situation. Es ist aber kein Kinoinfrastrukturfonds. Also das heißt, je nachdem, wie lang Kinos jetzt dann tatsächlich geschlossen sind, vor allem aber auch, wie lange dann die sehr hohen Abstandsregeln gelten, die ja dann auch keinen wirklich wirtschaftlichen Betrieb ermöglichen, wird man da auch die Kinos weiter unterstützen müssen. Das ist sehr wichtig. Da hoffe ich auch, dass das jetzt von so vielen Seiten so klar gesagt wurde, dass wir ja die Vielfalt der Kinos auch brauchen, dass wir die Vielfalt der Kulturorte brauchen. Sind die erst einmal weg, wird es die nicht mehr geben. Und jetzt in unserem Kinobereich, Filmbereich sehen wir ja gerade, das war gerade auch Thema, was machen denn gerade unabhängige Filmemacher, Arthouse-Filme, wenn es die Kinos nicht gibt. Das ist immer noch die beste Möglichkeit, einen Film herauszubringen. Und die große Gefahr ist ja, wenn diese Kinos wegbrechen, dass damit eine gesamte Kunstform wegfällt, nämlich der Arthouse-Film.
Ja, die gesamte Kunstform bricht weg, aber jetzt fangen ja schon ganz viele Bundesländer auch an, umzusatteln und machen Autokinos zum Beispiel, fangen an, dass Kinos, sagen wir mal, online ihre Filme streamen. Aber das kann doch, wenn wir ehrlich sind, nur eine Übergangslösung sein, oder?
Na klar, das sind natürlich Möglichkeiten und gerade die Programmkinoszene ist gerade sehr kreativ in Möglichkeiten, mit dem Publikum im Kontakt zu bleiben. Wir hier in Berlin setzen bislang auf das Fassadenkino in den Hinterhöfen, in den Kiezen. Ich hoffe, dass bald hier in der Stadt die Sommerkinos, also die Open-Air-Kinos, wieder an den Start gehen können. Das wäre extrem wichtig. Das Autokino, weiß ich nicht, ist sicherlich nicht das Fortbewegungsmittel der Zukunft, zumindest nicht in den Innenstädten. Also von dem her bräuchten wir vielleicht in Zukunft das Fahrradkino oder eben das normale Open-Air-Kino. Aber ja, nein, das sind wichtige Sachen. Auch das Streamen, wir selber kooperieren ja als York mit Mubi. Das ist eine schöne Sache, auch dem Publikum was zurückzugeben. Es werden aber nicht die Besucherzahlen erreicht und natürlich auch nicht die Erlöse, die wir brauchen, um die Kinos zu treiben. Und ich glaube, das ist ja das, was uns gerade allen fehlt. Das analoge Leben, das Begegnen, das gemeinsame Erleben und das, was wir gemeinsam erlebt haben, zu diskutieren und auszutauschen. Und dafür steht eben das Kino und der Ort. Und ich glaube, wir sehen jetzt alle und werden danach auch sehen, was uns abgegangen ist. Von dem her ist mir eigentlich langfristig für die Zukunft des Kinos, bin ich extrem optimistisch. Nur geht es halt jetzt darum, diese Zeit durchzustehen.
Christian, du hast es eben schon angesprochen. Jetzt ist die Aussicht da, dass es bald in einigen Bundesländern zumindest wieder die Kinos geöffnet werden. Wie muss ich mir das vorstellen? Laufe ich bald ins York-Kino an der Yorkstraße rein und nur jeder zweite Platz ist besetzt und ich trage eine Atemmaske währenddessen?
Na, es wäre ja schon schön, wenn jeder zweite Platz besetzt wäre, wenn man die Abstandsregelung von 1,50 Meter umsetzt, wird das in vielen Kinos Kapazitäten von 25% bis 30% ermöglichen. Aber ja, wir werden uns an all die Sicherheitsauflagen halten müssen. Gesundheit ist ja auch unsere Überzeugung, geht vor. Und das heißt, vielleicht wird man an der Kasse noch die Maske aufhaben, weil man vielleicht dann doch nicht ganz den großen Abstand hat. Im Saal, wenn der 1,5 Meter Abstand garantiert ist, wird man die ganz sicher ablegen können und dürfen. Die Kinos bereiten sich jetzt auf alles vor, was man jetzt schon vom Handel kennt in allen Bereichen, und so dass man da dann wieder in einer ganz schönen Atmosphäre, also fast, das ist ja dann Luxussaal-Atmosphäre mit dem Abstand, Filme wieder genießen kann. Natürlich ist es unser Wunsch, und ich glaube, das war unser aller Wunsch, dass man was findet zur Bekämpfung von Corona, einen Impfstoff, und man dann auch sich wieder insgesamt näher kommen kann und nicht nur mit den Lieben und der eigenen Familie, mit denen man ins Kino geht.
Christian, vielen, vielen Dank, dass du dir Zeit genommen hast, und ich drücke dir und uns allen die Daumen, dass wir bald wieder das tolle Kinoerlebnis haben können. Danke dir.
Ja, Luis, vielen Dank dir und viel Spaß euch allen noch.
Schönen Abend.